Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 733, and today is Christmas Eve. I hope everybody's having a great day, and the worst part of your day is listening to the bad news that I have to give you on this show. All right, just a reminder that you can find this show at the Libertarian Institute or on the blog at antiwar.com, YouTube, Rumble, or Odysee for the video version of the show. It's up anywhere you could listen to audio podcasts. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Kyle Anzalone _. Additionally, follow the new show, The Kyle Anzalone Show. It's the first link in the show notes page. All right, let's get into the news stories we have today. And we have a big one here. Report Trump will continue arms shipments to Ukraine. And this isn't just immediately after the inauguration. It's after a ceasefire breaks out in Ukraine. Apparently, Donald Trump is still planning to continue the military aid. So I wrote this one for the Libertarian Institute on December 22nd. President-elect Donald Trump is planning to continue military aid to Ukraine after his return to the White House. The transition team has told some members of NATO that the incoming president plans to increase the state's minimum military spending levels to double the current amount. So the Financial Times reports, in a boost for allies deeply concerned over their ability to support and protect Ukraine without Washington's backing, Trump now intends to maintain U.S. military support for Kiev after his inauguration. On the campaign trail, Trump pledged to end the war in Ukraine and cut the massive military spending on weapons transfers to Kiev. As a candidate, he never publicly stated his plan to end the war, but claimed he would do it on his first day in office. So, officials speaking with the Financial Times about Trump's current thinking said he has no plans to end weapon shipments to Ukraine even after the war. The president-elect, quote, believes he should never be Ukraine should never be given membership of NATO and wants an immediate end to the conflict. But the president-elect believes that supplying weapons to Kiev after a ceasefire would ensure peace through strength outcome. So this sounds like something that Trump could have very easily been talked into, right? That he's not exactly arguing that he's going to continue to support the proxy war against Russia, merely that even after the war is over, he's going to continue to flood arms into Ukraine. I think the biggest problem with that plan is that on the opposite side, they're going to view that as a continuation of the proxy war, particularly if those weapons are being used either by the Ukrainian military, are being funneled to different groups within Ukraine that do intend to use them to attack Russia either directly or in some kind of insurgency manner. So I think Russia is going to see this as highly problematic and will be a non-starter to any deal to end the war. So while the incoming president is viewing the policy as a concession to its European allies, it also plans to demand other NATO members drastically increase spending. So the Financial Times reports, Donald Trump's team has told European officials that the incoming president will demand NATO member states increase defense spending to 5% of GDP. One European official said they believe Trump will be willing to compromise on raising the minimum to 3.5% of GDP. During Trump's first presidency, he pressed nations in the alliance to hit the current minimum of 2%. However, only 2/3 of the bloc currently meet that standard. Officially, the government measures current defense spending at just over 3% of GDP. So Trump would barely hit his own minimum if he were to do so by the current U.S. government statistics on defense spending. To ensure the higher minimums, Trump is willing to place tariffs on NATO members at 10 to 20%, according to the Telegraph. And so this all sounds very Trumpian to me, and I know we have to be very skeptical when it comes to getting reports that are from the Trump transition team and not statements from Trump himself, who continues to say things like the dying and the fighting going on in Ukraine is horrific and that he wants to bring the war to an end, but still isn't saying himself anything concrete that would show he understands what the Russian demands here are and how the US could cut a deal with Russia to help Ukraine, but also bring this war to an end. I just haven't seen anything Trump say that shows he really understands how he would even be able to get that done. And so I'm very concerned here that this really is a deal that Trump has made, where we know one of the things that Trump likes most is signing deals that increase US weapon shipments. I think he personally sees it and believes that it's a boon to the US economy. It's really not. It doesn't really help the people. It's a boon to the, military industrial complex that exists, in the Washington Beltway. So there certainly are people who will profit off of it, but it won't be the American people. It isn't the American first policy that he pledged, ending the war in Ukraine, helping out the American people and not at the expense of other countries. But it seems that we're actually drifting more down that road, talking about, okay, so he's willing to continue to provide U.S. arms to Ukraine so long as European countries, and it, effectively guarantees that they're buying more American arms. I'm sure maybe even a majority of those sales, increasing the GDP minimum from 2 to 5%. And let's say most countries end up somewhere in the 3% bracket, we're talking tens, maybe $100 billion or so. Tens of those billions will be spent in European weapons manufacturers, but tens will be spent in American arm manufacturers too. And for Trump, that's probably enough to convince him that he will continue to arm Ukraine. So it's unfortunate, but this is what happens when the president is not somebody who reads and is just somebody who listens to his advisors, but surrounds themselves with the likes of Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz, Keith Kellogg. All right, next up here, this one from Dave DeCamp. 1 second, got the wrong article here. All right, here we have the correct article. Putin vows Ukraine will face destruction over drone attack deep inside Russia. So on Sunday, Russian President Vladimir Putin vowed Ukraine would face more destruction in response to Ukrainian drone attacks deep inside Russia. The attack was launched on Saturday and targeted apartment buildings in the city of Kazan, which is about 620 miles from the front lines in Ukraine. 6 drones hit a residential building and 1 hit an industrial facility, causing some damage, but no casualties are reported. Putin said, whoever and however tries to destroy something in our country, he will face destruction many times larger in his own country and will regret its attempts to do that in our country, Putin said. Throughout the war, Russia has stepped up its bombardment in Ukraine in response to Ukrainian attacks on Russian territory. Last week, Ukraine fired more U.S.-provided ATACMS missiles and British Storm Shadow missiles into Russia. 2 days later, Russia launched heavy missile strikes on Kiev, killing 1 citizen and cutting heat to hundreds of residential buildings. An attack Moscow said was a response to NATO firing missiles into its territory. While the ATACMS and Storm Shadows are more provocative since they are directly supported by NATO countries, Ukrainian drones are able to hit much deeper into Russia. There are also indications that the drone attacks are supported by the US and NATO. And just given the amount of support that the US gives Ukraine, it's hard to believe. Well, certainly, the war would not still be going on. Ukraine wouldn't still have drone factories and they still wouldn't be producing drones. But if you look at the amount of intelligence that the U.S. is giving the Ukrainians, the amount of money, logistical support, training the Ukrainian troops, even if the U.S. isn't involved in manufacturing these particular drones and they are manufactured in Kiev, I'm sure in Moscow and to Russian citizens, they do understand that without the U.S. support, these drones really wouldn't exist and wouldn't be plaguing them. And so, it's a small difference to say that this really isn't an American supported attack and the other one is. All right, next up, this one from Dave DeCamp, December 22nd, antiwar.com. Biden signs off on new $521 million aid package to Taiwan. So on Friday, the White House released a brief memo that said President Biden directed the authorization of a new military aid package for Taiwan worth $571 million. The memo didn't detail the contents of the arm package, only saying it would include defense articles and services of the Department of Defense and military education and training to provide assistance to Taiwan. The U.S. provided Taiwan with a similar $571 million arms package about 3 months ago, and the latest brings the total of U.S.-funded military aid sent to the island this year to over $1 billion. Both military aid packages were provided through the Presidential Drawdown Authority, which allows the president to ship weapons directly from U.S. military stockpiles. Congress has authorized the provision of about $1 million in PDA funds for Taiwan each year, and the $95 billion foreign military aid bill signed by Biden in April included $1.9 million that could be used to replenish weapons sent to Taiwan. The U.S. has separately sold weapons to Taiwan since severing diplomatic relations with the island in 1979, but it wasn't until last year that the U.S. started providing U.S.-funded military aid, a step that marked a significant escalation to Beijing. Separately, on Friday, the State Department approved a new arms sale to Taiwan worth a combined $295 million, including a command and control systems and Mk-75 76mm gun mounts. In response to the military aid and weapon sales, China said the U.S. was, quote, playing with fire, and repeated its warning that the issue of Taiwan is a major red line in the U.S.-China relationship that must not be crossed. In recent months, China has stepped up its warnings about Taiwan and launched major drills around the island. Biden has ignored Beijing's concern and has repeatedly approved a slew of new weapon sales for the island. And of course, this is the one place where Trump is likely going to be worse than Biden on the Asia Pacific. So whatever escalations Biden has taken, you can expect Trump to continue them, if not significantly escalate them. All right, this one, Philippines says it will acquire controversial U.S. missile systems. China warns of arms race. So the Philippines said Monday that it plans to acquire a controversial new U.S. missile systems known as the Typhoon, prompting Beijing to warn of an arms race in the region. The Typhoon missile launcher is a ground-based system that is concealed in a 40-foot shipping container that can fire nuclear-capable Tomahawk missiles, which have a range of more than 1,000 miles, and SM-6 missiles, which can hit targets 290 miles away. The U.S. began developing the Typhoon after it withdrew from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty in 2019. The INF was a Cold War-era treaty between the U.S. and the Russians that prohibited the deployment of ground-based missiles with a range of 310 to 34,000 miles. The U.S. sent the Typhoon system to the Philippines in April for military drills. The deployment was initially said to be temporary, but the Typhoon is still there despite strong protests from Beijing. So the Lieutenant General, commander of the Philippines Army, told reporters that Manila would acquire the Typhoon system because we see feasibility and functionality in our concept of archipelagic defense implementation. I'm happy to report that our fellow countrymen that your army is developing this capability for the interest of protecting our sovereignty. So the Chinese foreign military spokeswoman Mao Ning said it was asked about the comments and said that China firmly opposes the deployment of U.S. mid-range capability missiles in the Philippines. We have made clear that to this opposition more than once. Let me stress again, for the Philippines, by bringing in this strategic offensive weapon, it is enabling a country outside the region to fuel tensions and antagonism in this region and incite geopolitical confrontation and arms race. And so I'm sure in the new year we will see China taking reciprocal measures of some kind. All right, a couple stories on the Middle East before we wrap up here. This one from Dave DeCamp. Israel has turned Jabalia refugee camp into ghost town. So the Israeli military has almost completely destroyed the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza. Once one of the most densely populated places in Earth, it has been turned into a ghost town, Haaretz reported on Sunday. First established in 1948 as a refuge for Palestinians driven from their home by Zionist militias during the establishment of the modern state of Israel, or the Nakba, the Jabalia refugee camp has been under a total siege since early October as a part of a new ethnic cleansing campaign to move all Palestinians in northern Gaza to the south. The IDF estimates that it has completely destroyed 70% of the buildings in the camp, and the ones that remain are damaged. So reporter Amos Harrell reported, during a brief visit to the camp on Friday afternoon, I could see the few buildings that were still standing were badly damaged. According to the IDF data, the Israeli military has forcibly driven 96,000 Palestinians out of the Jabalia refugee camp. The IDF also said it killed 2,000 Palestinians during the operation, claiming most were armed, but there is significant evidence that the IDF kills unarmed civilians and counts them as terrorists. The IDF says that 35 Israeli soldiers have been killed in the fighting since early October. So the Haaretz report says that only 100 terrorists and similar number of civilians remain in the camp. Jabalia has become a ghost town. Outside you mainly see pack after pack of stray dogs roaming around hunting for scraps of food. The ethnic cleansing campaign, which is based on an outline known as the General's Plan, has been forced on Jabalia, Bet Hanun, and Bet Lihaya. In each city, the IDF is demolishing every building in sight to ensure Palestinians have nowhere to return, and the campaign will likely lead to the establishment of Jewish settlements and permanent Israeli occupation of the territory. All right, and the last article we got on today's show, Israeli officials say Lebanon withdrawal may go slower than planned. So under the November 27th Israel-Lebanon ceasefire, Israel is to withdraw all of its troops from southern Lebanon within 60 days. Today, however, officials said that Israel may miss that deadline, evidenced by how few troops have left Lebanon so far. These statements to the Israeli press shift the blame for the slow pullout to the Lebanese military, saying its deploying into southern Lebanon is too slow. Per the ceasefire, Lebanon also has 60 days to put troops in the south, which, in contradiction to Israel, the U.S. believes will accomplish it in 50 days. So the Lebanese prime minister has called on the U.S. and France as guarantors of the ceasefire to do something to speed up the Israeli pullout, saying they need to put an end to the Israeli procrastination. The prime minister isn't the only one concerned about the sluggish situation. The UNIFIL peacekeepers, so those are UN peacekeepers, issued a statement calling for an accelerated Israel withdrawal from Lebanon. They say they want to see accelerated progress in both Israel leaving and the Lebanese military forces arriving in the south. Israel's repeated and ongoing violations of the ceasefire are undoubtedly a big reason on why the Lebanese people want Israel out. On Sunday, Israeli forces blew up several homes in one city, alongside attacks in other towns and villages in the south. At least 286 Israeli ceasefire violations have occurred since the ceasefire began, killing more than 30 people. Overnight, Israel also carried out airstrikes on the village of Tabish in southern Lebanon, killing 2 people and wounding another. The strikes took place near the local public school. However, the highest profile violations were probably those on the southern border town of Naskora. In Nakora, Israeli troops entered the town and raised the Israeli flag at the entrance, even though it is plainly on the Lebanese side of the border. Days earlier, Israeli artillery had destroyed a number of civilian homes in the town, as it has in many places where the fire was supposed to be ceased. UNIFIL statements on the withdrawal acceleration today reiterated a call for all sides to stop ceasefire violations. In general, the meaningful violations have all come from the Israeli side, though Israel has claimed the presence of cars in southern Lebanon is a violation in and of itself and justifies IDF fire, which is absolutely insane, but this is how the Israelis have treated the situation, any diplomacy with their neighbors, as, just another method of warfare to continue to push what Netanyahu and the Israelis want. All right, everybody, that's where I'm wrapping up the show for today, and this will be the last new episode until Friday. Wednesday and Thursday, I'm planning on releasing audio only 2 episodes of the Kyle Anzalone show. So there will be something new in the podcast feed, but these are not new episodes. I've recorded them over the past couple of weeks, but I want to put a sample of the Kyle Anzalone show in the podcast feed for anyone who hasn't checked it out yet. And if anybody wants to do me a favor this Christmas season, it is subscribing to the Kyle Anzalone show on YouTube. I really appreciate everyone who does that. Thanks, guys, and hope everybody enjoys their Christmas.